The distress beacon died with a fading whimper, leaving nothing but the cold hum of failing life support. Serai'ka pressed her hand against the viewport, watching her fleet's final transport vanish into the jump corridor without her. They had left her behind. Not from cruelty, but from calculation. One injured navigator wasn't worth the fuel to extract from a dying scout ship. Her scales, normally a vibrant blue-green, had faded to dull gray. The bioluminescent patterns along her arms flickered weakly, reflecting her body's desperate attempt to conserve energy. She had maybe 12 hours before the cold stopped her heart entirely. The small moon below offered no hope. Atmospheric readings showed it was barely habitable. A frontier outpost her people had never bothered to colonize. But it had oxygen, and it had gravity. Two things her failing ship no longer reliably provided. Serai'ka made her choice. The landing burned the last of her fuel reserves and nearly tore the scout ship apart. She felt every jarring impact through her bones as the vessel skipped across frozen ground, tearing through ice and rock before finally grinding to a halt against a snowbank. Warning lights painted the cockpit red. The temperature gauge plummeted. She grabbed her emergency pack, supplies meant for 3 days that would need to last however long remained. Her translator device, her identification chip, a thermal blanket that wouldn't be enough. The hatch opened with a hydraulic hiss, and the cold hit her like a physical blow. Bennet Fairchild was 3 weeks into his solitary mining contract when his sensors picked up the crash. He stood at the window of his small hab unit, coffee cooling in his hands, watching the streak of light carve across the dawn sky. Something about it was wrong, too controlled to be a meteor, too desperate to be a planned landing. He'd come to this moon to escape people. After the divorce, after the company downsizing, after his sister stopped returning his calls, he'd wanted silence and solitude. He'd gotten both in abundance, working a small thorium mine that barely paid enough to justify the isolation. But he'd been raised better than to ignore someone in trouble. Bennet pulled on his thermal suit and loaded his snowcrawler with emergency supplies, medical kit, thermal blankets, water, food, a rescue beacon of his own. Though out here, who would answer it? The crash site was 4 kilometers northeast, tucked in a valley between ice formations that sparkled in the morning light. He spotted the wreckage immediately, a design he didn't recognize. All smooth curves and strange angles that suggested non-human engineering. His heart rate quickened. Smoke rose from the rear of the vessel. Scorch marks decorated the ice where it had skidded, and there, barely visible against the white expanse, a trail of dark footprints led away from the wreck. They were wrong, those footprints. Too narrow, with additional toe marks that suggested a different bone structure. And they were getting more erratic, weaving left and right as whoever made them struggled forward. Bennet followed. He found her collapsed in the snow half a kilometer from her ship. At first, he thought she was wearing some kind of elaborate costume, the scaled skin, the luminescent patterns now barely visible beneath the frost forming on her body, the way her limbs bent at slightly different angles than human joints would allow. Then she moved, a small shudder, and he realized with absolute certainty that this was real. She was alien. She was dying. And she was looking at him with eyes that held more colors than he had names for, filled with a fear he recognized in his marrow. "Hey," he said softly, knowing she probably couldn't understand. "Hey, I've got you." She tried to move away, to crawl backward through the snow, but her strength was gone. Bennet moved slowly, hands visible, making himself as non-threatening as possible. He'd worked with spooked animals before. The principle seemed applicable. He unwrapped a thermal blanket and held it up, showing it to her. Then he carefully, so carefully, draped it around her shoulders. She flinched, but didn't resist. Couldn't resist. Her lips moved, forming sounds he couldn't interpret. He pulled out his own emergency translator, standard equipment for frontier workers, and held it up. "Can you understand this?" A long pause. Then she reached into her pack with trembling hands and withdrew a similar device. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped it. Bennet caught it, activated it, and held it between them. "Please." The translation came through, mechanical but clear. "Please don't hurt me." "I won't," Bennet said. "I'm going to take you somewhere warm, okay?" She studied his face for a long moment, then gave the smallest nod. Getting her to the crawler took 20 minutes of slow, painful progress. She couldn't walk, couldn't support her own weight. Bennet ended up carrying her, feeling how light she was, how her body temperature was dangerously low even through the thermal blanket. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he could feel the weak flutter of whatever she had instead of a pulse. Inside the crawler, he cranked the heat as high as it would go and racked her in every spare blanket he'd brought. She curled into a tight ball, shaking violently, her scales making soft clicking sounds as they contracted. The drive back to his hab took forever. Bennet kept glancing over, terrified she'd stop breathing, stop moving. But her eyes remained open, tracking their surroundings with a wariness that never quite faded. His living quarters were small sleeping area, kitchen unit, washing station, and a common room that served as both office and recreation. He'd never expected to bring anyone here, certainly never expected to need a medical facility. He helped her to his bed, the only proper sleeping surface in the hab. She resisted initially, making sounds of protest through the translator. "Take floor," she managed. Not worthy of." "You're injured," Bennet interrupted firmly. "You get the bed. I've got a perfectly good couch." He brought water first, watching as she drank with desperate gulps. Then he unpacked his medical kit, feeling completely inadequate. He had bandages, an antiseptic, painkillers designed for human biology. He had no idea what would help her or what might make things worse. "I don't know how to treat your injuries," he admitted, "but I'll do my best not to make them worse. Can you tell me what hurts?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Everything cold. Inside cold. Hypothermia." That much he could address. Bennet brought more blankets, brought heated packs, brought warm broth that he'd made for himself. She accepted each offering with visible surprise, as if kindness was the last thing she'd expected. The bioluminescent patterns along her arms began to glow more steadily as her core temperature rose. The gray tinge to her scales faded toward blue-green. He learned her name that first evening, Serai'ka. It sounded like water over stones, like wind through crystal formations. She learned his, repeating it carefully through the translator until the pronunciation satisfied her. "Why?" she asked finally, as he prepared the couch for sleeping. "Why help enemy?" Bennet paused, considering. "Are we enemies? I don't even know who your people are." "Fleet. Kethrani Fleet. We—" She hesitated. "We scouted this sector, claimed territories." "Well, nobody told me," Bennet said. "And even if they had, wouldn't matter. You needed help." She looked at him with those multi-hued eyes, and he couldn't read the expression on her alien features. But something in her posture softened slightly. "Sleep," he said gently. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." The next days fell into a careful rhythm. Bennet worked his mining shifts, leaving Serai'ka with food, water, and entertainment downloads on his tablet. When he returned, he found her exactly where he'd left her, as if she was afraid to impose further on his space. She ate sparingly despite his urging, and he realized with growing concern that she was rationing, still thinking like someone who couldn't count on her next meal. He started cooking extra at every opportunity, leaving snacks within easy reach, making it clear through action what words couldn't quite convey, that she was welcome to anything in his hab. Slowly, incrementally, she began to trust. He came home one evening to find her in the common room, studying his collection of books with evident fascination. She startled when he entered, clutching a volume to her chest. "Sorry," she said immediately. "I shouldn't have." "It's fine," Bennet assured her. "Take whatever you want. Though I'm not sure the translator works on printed text. Some words I recognize." She held up the book, a battered copy of Steinbeck. "This one speaks of people helping other people in hard times." "Yeah," Bennet said. "That's pretty much it." "Your species does this? Helps?" The question carried such genuine confusion that it made Bennet's chest ache. "Sometimes, when we're at our best, yeah." She set the book down carefully, reverently. "My fleet left me. Calculated that rescue cost too much fuel. They were logical." "They were wrong," Bennet said firmly. "No, I understand their choice. I was just one navigator. The fleet was many. You're not just anything. You're a person. That matters." Serai'ka tilted her head. A gesture he was learning meant she was processing something difficult. "Your words make no mathematical sense." "Good," Bennet said. "Some things shouldn't be reduced to math." A week passed, then two. Serai'ka's strength returned, and with it, her natural grace. She moved through his small hab like water, her scales shifting color with her moods, deeper blues when calm, yellow-green when anxious, bright turquoise when something pleased her. She helped where she could, learning his routines, adapting to his space with careful consideration. She was brilliant, he discovered. She could calculate orbital mechanics in her head, could fix his malfunctioning sensor array with improvised tools, could speak 6 languages even before the translator caught up. She sang sometimes, when she thought he couldn't hear sounds like wind chimes that made the air feel different, and she was funny. Re-observations about human habits delivered with perfect timing. Gentle teasing about his coffee addiction. Stories about her fleet that started serious and ended absurd. Bennet found himself looking forward to coming home in ways he hadn't in years. They were playing cards, a human game she'd picked up with unnerving speed when his long-range comm crackled to life. "Attention, human outpost. This is Kethrani Fleet Command. We have tracked one of our vessels to this location. Surrender the deserter immediately." Serai'ka went absolutely still, her scales draining to ash gray. Bennet stood slowly. "Stay here." "No." Her voice was firm despite the fear in her eyes. "I must face this. It is It's nothing," Bennet interrupted. "You're not going anywhere." He activated the comm. "This is Bennet Fairchild, independent contractor. There's no deserter here." A pause. Then a new voice, colder. "Do not lie, human. Our sensors detect Kethrani biological signatures at your location." "You detect my guest," Bennet corrected. "She's not leaving." "You do not understand. She is fleet property. She has obligations. She's a person with rights," Bennet said, his voice hardening. "And she's under my protection. You are one human on an isolated moon. We are a battle fleet. Do not be foolish." Bennet looked at Serai'ka, saw the terror and resignation warring on her face, saw the way she'd started to stand, to accept what she believed was inevitable. He made his choice. "Then come down here and take her," Bennet said. "But I'm sending a message to every frontier channel, every mining guild, every human outpost in 3 sectors. By the time you land, the whole damn frontier will know the Kethrani fleet abuses and abandons its people. Good luck trading with humans after that." Silence on the other end. Long enough that Bennet wondered if he'd pushed too far. "Then, you would start an incident over one navigator?" "I'd start a war over one navigator," Bennet said calmly. "If that's what it takes." More silence. He could hear muffled discussion, arguments in Kethrani that his translator couldn't quite catch. Finally, "This is irregular, unprecedented. So is abandoning people to die," Bennet said. "We will consult with command. But understand, human, if she wishes to return, you cannot prevent it." "I won't have to," Bennet said, "because it's her choice, not yours, not mine, hers." The comm went silent. Bennet turned to find Serai'ka staring at him, her scales cycling through colors he'd never seen: deep purple, silver, gold. Her hands were shaking. "You would do that?" she whispered. "Risk war? For me?" "I meant what I said before," Bennet told her. "You're a person. That matters. And for what it's worth," he took a breath, "you matter to me." She moved then, closing the distance between them in 3 fluid steps. Her hands found his, cool and scaled and trembling. The bioluminescent patterns along her arms blazed bright as stars. "I choose to stay," she said clearly, "if you will have me." "For as long as you want," Bennet promised. The fleet's response came 2 days later. Formal notice that navigator Serai'ka was released from service, her obligations fulfilled. Bennet suspected there was more to it: political calculations, diplomatic considerations he'd never fully understand. But the end result was what mattered. She was free. They stood together at the viewport, watching the fleet's distant ships make their jump to elsewhere. Serai'ka's hand found his, their fingers intertwining despite the differences. "What happens now?" she asked. Bennet squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever you want. You could contact human authorities, request transport to a major station. Find your own path." "And if my path is here?" She turned to face him, her eyes holding all those impossible colors. "With you?" He smiled. "Then I guess I should warn you that winters here last 6 months. The entertainment downloads are terrible, and I snore." "I know," she said, and her scales shimmered with what he'd learned was her version of laughter. "I have been listening to you snore for 3 weeks. And you still want to stay?" "I still want to stay." They made it work. It wasn't always easy. They were different species, different cultures, different ways of seeing the universe. But they learned each other's languages, both the spoken and the unspoken. Bennet taught her about human stories and terrible coffee, and the way spring felt on this small moon. Serai'ka taught him about star navigation, and Kethrani music, and the complex beauty of bioluminescent communication. The mining company was surprisingly accommodating when Bennet explained he had a partner now. They sent additional supplies, upgraded his HAB unit to accommodate two, even offered Serai'ka contract work analyzing ore samples with her superior mathematical abilities. Other humans started arriving at the outpost as word spread, scientists interested in the region, traders looking for new routes, even a few families seeking frontier life. What had been Bennet's isolated retreat became the beginning of a small community. And at its heart, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. On cold nights, when the wind howled outside their expanded HAB, they'd sit together by the viewport. Serai'ka would glow softly in the darkness, her patterns creating constellations across her skin. Bennet would trace those patterns with gentle fingers, learning the stories they told. "Do you regret it?" he asked once. "Staying here instead of going to a human station, seeing more of the galaxy?" She considered, her scales shifting to deep, contented blue. "I have seen much of galaxy. Most of it was cold and empty and full of mathematics. This," she gestured at their home, at him. "This is warm, this is full, this has you." "That's not much of a galaxy," Bennet said, but he was smiling. "It is enough galaxy for me," Serai'ka said. She leaned against him, her head fitting perfectly into the curve of his shoulder. "More than enough." Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Inside, two people from different worlds built something new, not human, not Kethrani, but uniquely theirs. A home made not from walls or roofs, but from choice and care and the simple revolutionary act of seeing another person's worth. Serai'ka's patterns glowed brighter in the darkness, and Bennet held her close, and they were home. If you have enjoyed the story, tell YouTube to send you more stories like this by subscribing to this channel, liking the video, and leaving a comment.